to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. Hope you're all having a good winter. Winter has finally arrived here in the Rockies, and it's been excellent chasing POW time the last couple weeks, so having fun with that, but thinking about flying. The season is rapidly approaching. Been watching the awesome flying going on in India and the World Cup, and down in Colombia at the British, and seeing some Americans do really well, which has been a lot of fun to see. And yeah, just thinking about flying. And on that note, this next show is with Emi Carvalho, a Portuguese pilot currently living in Switzerland. We interviewed Emi back for a bonus show in 2020. He's been at it for a long time and is kind of a weather guru. So that show was on weather and how he forecasts and all the different models he looks at and what he gleans from those to help all of you with your own weather forecasting. And so we got Emi back on the show because he reached out recently and talked about bivvying with his hang glider. And I thought, man, that's the only time I've ever heard of that is with Jeff Shapiro. Talked about potentially doing a trip together, a bi-wingual trip where I would paraglide and he would hang glide and we'd do a big bivvy. And Emi's been doing it. He uses these short pack hang gliders, which are not a new thing. They've been around for a long time, but they're manageable. It's like carrying a tandem on your back, but narrower and a little bit longer, but not crazy long like you think of hang gliders going on top of a car. And he's doing some really wicked adventures. Emi started out hang gliding over 11 years ago and flies both and instructs in paragliding, and now but he says his wing of choice when it's the right conditions is a hang glider, and these short pack hang gliders give him access to deeper country and more places and more adventure. So I really enjoyed this talk and hearing about how he adjusts for the two different types of choices in flying and wind, and what you have to be more mindful of flying one versus the other. Really good comparison. He was very articulate in saying how all this goes down, and describing how it all works. Pretty inspiring stuff. So happy winter, and enjoy this show with Emi, and get your hang gliders out. Cheers. Emi, great to have you back on the show. You reminded me that we did a weather show with you quite a while back, so we might have to talk about weather again, but you've been doing some pretty fun things. I've never actually heard of Volbiv with a hang glider except from Jeff Shapiro. He talked about it years ago and said, hey, we could do a bi-wingual bivvy trip. And I thought, that is just ludicrous. I can't imagine doing that with a hang glider, but he had kind of some cool systems put together, and I'm excited to hear about yours. But welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Nice to see you again. The short pack hang gliders, they roughly speaking weight as much as a tandem paragliding set. So it's not exactly the most hike and fly and Volbiv approach, but it's definitely much more friendly than a standard long size hang glider. And that's possible, yeah.
What did you call it?
Short pack hang glider. So the largest difference is that a standard hang glider, when you pack it, instead of being a nice backpack that you can carry anywhere, it's 5 meters, so that's 15 feet long or so tube that is quite problematic to transport. We usually carry it on top of our cars, a short packed one, it short packs to only 2 meters. So that's something you can actually carry in your back.
And is that because the tube then extends, or how does it look in the air compared to a standard hang glider?
It looks like a standard hang glider, although not the latest models. So if you compare it, we are typically talking about wings from the 90s, 80s and 90s, or maybe 2000s in some cases. But anyway, the models are very similar to a beginner wing. And so if you compare it with any standard beginner wing, once it's assembled, it's very standard, very normal. Indeed, the biggest difference is that the standard tubes are dividable in 3. and that means that you can really get it to 1/3 of the length roughly, and that simplifies a lot in the logistics of transporting. Of course, that has the disadvantage of taking a bit longer to prepare it, much more than paragliding for sure, but it's worth it for the special flights that you can do with it.
And was this developed specifically for kind of bivvy flying, or was this just developed so people could transport it easier and people like you are going, hey, I can use this for bivvy flying?
So the company that makes this type of wings, there's actually a few. I'm going to talk about the one that the model that I own. The company that did this model has been developing hang gliders since the 70s, and they came up in the 80s with their first hike and fly model. Remember, their paragliding was just starting then, right? So you had the option of having maybe 15 kilos or 10 to 15 kilos altogether weight with a paraglider that could fly with a glide ratio of 4:1, 3:1, 5:1. I'm not 100% sure what were the marks at that time. Or you could have a hang glider that was heavier, for sure, about 25 kilos. So that's, I don't know, 50 pounds or so. But that has a glide ratio of 10:1. And that was a very significant step back then. Of course, then the development of paragliding and the glide ratios that you get nowadays, you easily get better glide ratios with any competition paraglider. So that decreases the interest perhaps of this type of wings. And anyway, hang glider went into a very different development stage where it kept focusing on performance. And so you find wings that are much more, logistically cumbersome, because they are these very large tubes that you need to move on top of your car. You cannot take cable cars. It's difficult for air travel. But when they are flying, they have much better performances. They fly with glide ratios of 15 to 25, depends if we are talking about rigid wings or flexi wings. Originally, to come back to your question, sorry for the long answer, originally they were hike and fly machines. That was the goal.
Huh. Wow. I mean, I can't remember who it was said it was one of the hang gliders I had on the show, and I need to get more. So that's why I'm excited to talk to you. I mean, I know you spent a lot of time paragliding as well and instructing, but I think I asked the question. So what's the main thing that's great about hang gliding? And he said, well, birds fly like birds fly, right? With your head forward. And I thought, yeah, exactly. We don't sit, birds don't sit and fly. And so it does make sense. It's a sexier way to move around the sky. How'd you get into all this? What's your background? You're from Portugal, but you're living in Switzerland. Is that right?
Correct. So I fully agree with that answer, by the way. It's really the body position that is the biggest advantage of hang gliding. I will say the wing is so close to your body as well, and the way that you control it is somewhat similar to how you will drive a motorcycle, for example. It really gives you a feeling of belonging to the wing, or the wing belonging to your body.
It's not so separate.
It's not so separate, exactly. Of course, with paragliding, you develop similar sensitivity to it, and you have the sensibility of understanding very well the wing, but it's an extension of your fingers. Let's say a paraglider, it's an extension of your fingers, but it's not a bird flying or Superman or Neo or whatever flying creature we could imagine. It's a different thing. You are seated, right? And with the hang glider being in this lay down position, I think it's the biggest difference. Then of course you have the speed and the glide ratios. We could talk about that, but the biggest one is the position. So I learned how to hang glide first.
Okay.
I learned how to hang glide first back in Portugal 11 years ago. And the reason for it was I finished university. I was working and studying before, and then I had a few savings, and I figured out that I should get a hobby. Flying was a good idea because I vividly recall a trip with my parents to one of the mountains in Portugal. They are not very high, but we still have a few mountains. And I recall seeing a group of hang gliders flying. And that stayed in my mind. I must have been, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old. And like I'm sure almost everyone that you talk with that flies, I also had those dreams of flying when I was a kid. So yeah, when I had a bit of money and a bit of time, I decided to start hang gliding. That's how it all started. In Portugal, we often learn how to fly in the dunes. It's very similar in the US. In California, for example, I think it's one of the hot spots for hang gliding as well, where you learn in the dunes. You are typically flying with a significant amount of wind, very often too much wind for paragliders. Maybe not so much now with parakites and mini wings, but at the time when I started, those were either non-existing or less popular, the mini wings at that time. So the hang glider allowed us to fly more often than the paragliders. And yeah, again, the body position was a big difference. But if you start thinking about traveling, then things change.
What was the, I mean, because you do both, what's easier to learn looking back? I mean, obviously it's not so, that's maybe not the greatest thing to think about or analogy because you already knew how to hang glide, so you could bring those skills to paragliding. But, you know, if you were just starting fresh, what would be, if you could do it all over again, what would be the one to learn first?
I'm very glad I started hang gliding because paragliding is easier to start. And so I guess it will be similar to skiing and snowboarding, right? If you develop yourself in one, it's less likely that you will want to be a beginner again in the same places, but with this other sport. And it will happen the same. If I had started paragliding, I think I would never even try hang gliding, or if I was to try it, I will give it up quickly because it's a longer process to learn. I think in paragliding, realistically, you can get to that beginner license level, whatever that means in each country, the IPPI 3 or so. You get that into roughly 10 days, bit more, bit less, depends, of course, but top level, that's what we are talking about. And hang gliding, realistically, you need at least twice as much, probably a little bit more. And it's more physically demanding because in the beginning you are, particularly in the dunes that I was mentioning, you are carrying the wing up and down the dune. The down is easy because you are just gliding or running down, but carrying it back up again is much easier with a paraglider.
Yeah, sure. What about the risk aspect at the learning end of things? You know, with the, you know, whenever I watch somebody learning how to hang glide, I'm always kind of going, oh gosh, you know, like the landings with the flare, and it seems trickier, but I don't know. Is it?
I think it's trickier. I will agree with that statement because the wing has less passive safety. In the paraglider, if you don't do much, look, the thing is not flying that fast and it's so far from the ground. You might be on the ground or close to the ground, but the wing itself is far from the ground, right above your head. So you don't have to worry too much about the wing hitting the ground. You just have to focus on yourself and running and not touching the ground very fast. And if you have a little bit of wind, then it's so slow that even if you are not very athletic, that doesn't really matter. That's why you have elderly people learning how to paraglide, and they are perfectly capable of doing so. For hang gliding, I think it depends if you are learning the dune style or soaring style, ground takeoff style, or if you are learning to fly with a towing mechanism. Because in a towing mechanism, it can be as easy to take off, even easier actually, because you might have a mechanism with wheels that really balances the wing in the beginning, and then eventually you are off the ground and it's double. There's double safety in the winch mechanism that both the pilot and the instructor can disconnect it. So you are quite safe in that aspect. But eventually you need to come for landing, of course. And if you don't do the flaring appropriately and you don't have wind, if you have wind, things get easy. But if you don't have wind, or if you have very light wind, the typical behavior is that you will hit with the bars or the wheels that you usually have in a school on the ground, and the nose, so the front of the wing, goes down and you hit it as well with your face. That's why you often see the hang glider pilots, they use full face masks, almost all of them. And there's a reason for that. It's otherwise we lose our teeth in the learning process. But then when you are after you pass those those initial steps, where again you should be very supported by a school to guarantee that you develop slowly and with safety. Once you pass those, it's different. So you have different sources of risk when paragliding or hang glider or hang gliding. Some of them are still the same, but while in paragliding maybe the largest issues are associated with collapses on the wing and stalls. Stalling a wing in paragliding, it's a massive thing for a beginner. Of course, you can develop that later on, but for a beginner, that's a massive issue. That's not so in hang gliding. First, you don't really get collapses because you have you don't have an inflatable wing. It's a mechanism with aluminium or with carbon fiber, and then you also don't really have a big issue in installing unless you are very close to the ground, because when the wing stalls, the wings are built so that they are nose heavy, meaning that after it stalls, the nose goes down and you regain the flight. So you could stall the wing in a standard flight in your second or third long altitude, high altitude flight without any issue. And of course, that's not happening with paragliding, right? That would be crazy to do that. But there's an additional risk that is the landing. You need much flatter landing zones, first of all, and longer as well. So while with paragliding, you can land almost anywhere, realistically, it's not so with the hang gliding. You need a bit more space to land.
Yeah, this was the thing that always, when Jeff talked about, Volbiv with a hang glider, that was the first thing I thought, man, there's very often when I'm flying Volbiv, I mean, it depends on where. In the Alps, there's so many places to land. It's not really an issue. I mean, there are, of course, places that are also very deep that would be trickier to land. I remember a lot of very tight landings in the X-Alps for sure, but a lot of the places we are, there just is a lot of trees. Thinking about doing it, for example, on the trip that I did with Will Gadd across the Canadian Rockies, that would have been really scary on a hang glider, just because there were so many places we had to put it down that were tiny, that just didn't have a field or any kind of run out. You really had to almost bring it in like parachutal to come into a really tight spot. So that always made me nervous. I'm assuming terrain choice and where you're doing these trips is a big part of the decision making.
It's quite relevant. Almost always when you are flying paragliding as well, you should check the landing, or at least be familiar with how it looks with any obstacles and so on. And that becomes more relevant for hang gliding, particularly because of the flatness of the ground. Because when you are flying, 1,000 feet above the ground, everything seems more or less flat, unless it's a clear slope. But when you are coming very close, it might not be so. And while on a paraglider, that's not a gigantic problem. It just means that you land in a slight slope or something like that, because again, the wing is very far from the ground. But on a hang glider is an issue. The wing is so much closer to the ground that if you have an uneven terrain, you will probably hit one side of the wing on the ground before you manage a perfect landing, and that will of course make the wing turn and have a little crash. There's a few things that we can do to get more prepared. So one of them is the choice of the wing. Of course, a performant wing, a high-level competition wing, will glide like crazy, and it will have a very strong ground effect as well, that you start flying maybe 2 or 3 feet from the ground and keep gliding for 50 meters. So you need a space. But if you have less advanced wing with worse glide, with worse flying characteristics, then you will not have such a long space requirement. You can land in shorter places. So that's one. A second one that you might see, particularly with the high aspect ratio, the competition wings, is that sometimes before landing you see the pilots dropping or opening a small parachute, a drag chute that as the name indicates, it's the operation there is to increase the drag and therefore decrease the glide angle so that you don't need so much space to land. You could use that one with any wing, but it becomes more relevant for performant wings that need to land in tight spaces. And the third thing is I'm not good at that, but advanced hang glider pilot will be good at that. That is, we can also land on slopes going up the slope. So while the paraglider will typically choose on a slope to land across the slope, right? So side slope, not going up, not going down. Maybe going up in the X-Alps, but except that one is usually on the side. The hang glider will always choose to come going upslope. The reason for that is because it's important that it doesn't hit the ground with one side of the wing again. And so if you have a slope, usually you could make a good landing as well, as long as you have an unobstructed slope. But of course, that's then again more of an advanced technique.
How would you compare that to, the whole, flying uphill, downwind, call it fly on the wall type landing, that Kriegel and really Patrick, I always credit them to that move that happened. They started putting out on videos about 10 years ago and the rest of the world went, whoa, oh my gosh. And now that the level they're doing at is really extraordinary. I worked at this very, very hard for both the 2019 and 2021 races and there's a good chance I'm going to blow that when I do. I mean, it's a very fine movement with, the variables are many, but I understand with a hang glider, it's like you said, is it easier or does it still require the same amount of skill or because it's really easy to mess up with a paraglider with your timing and.
It's easier on the hang gliding, on the hang glider. That being said, I can do it with a paraglider, but I cannot do it with a hang glider because I'm a better paraglider pilot with many more flights than I have hang gliding. So I assume Kriegel was probably inspired also by how hang gliders land, because that's a standard landing procedure for a few decades now. Indeed, what makes it easier conceptually for a hang glider to do it is the range of speed that they have. So they can easily speed up by just pulling the bar closer to your knees, and you easily speed up in that final approach, and all of that energy that you gain, you can then also more easily transform it and also faster transform it into the right angle so that you are going up with the terrain and then eventually flaring and stopping. So it's easier to do it with a hang glider. If you have a paraglider and a hang glider pilot that are doing the same type of cross-country flights, let's say both of them do 100 kilometers flights with some regularity, the hang glider pilot should be able to do those type of landings upslope, while I assume that most of the paraglider pilots at that level will probably opt to land down side slope rather than upslope.
So is the kind of the coup d'etat for doing Bivvy, is it still at the end of the day to top land and, camp where you've landed and take off from the same place? Is that what you're trying to do with the hang glider? Or, obviously that's what you're trying to do, but is that what you're often able to do? Or is that the trickiness of top landing with a hang glider just make that, it has to be an extraordinarily good spot?
Yes, that's a big difference between paragliding and hang gliding as well. Our Volbiv means typically landing down. Of course, we aim to land up in a nice large flat area or going up slope. But the reality is that the added risks that you take by trying to do a landing in the top of the mountain where you have a wing so much closer to the ground than the paraglider is that it's very easy to have it uneven and again mess up the landing, while it's much easier to land on the valley, particularly because in the valley at the end of the day or in the middle of the day you expect that you'll probably have some good valley wind, right? And that also simplifies the landing approach for a hang glider. And then you either hike up or the Volbiv there very often might be that you just take the cable car up. And
Sure.
I know that it sounds strange for a paraglider, but for a hang glider, if you are flying, just taking the glider with you and taking public transport, that still feels like Volbiv because the logistics are so much more complicated. And so you might just be landing on the valley and then take the cable car up if one exists, or take a bus, or just find your way up. You might also do a hike and fly to go back to the mountain, sleep there, and then repeat on the next day, or even sleep on the bottom and go up on the next day. Because also an important difference between paragliding and hang gliding is the logistics of packing and unpacking the wing take much longer on the hang glider, and therefore you probably don't want to do multiple flights in the same day. Most of the time you are probably looking into doing one flight, maybe two flights in the same day if you are doing Volbiv. It may be different if you are doing tandems, or if you are doing coastal soaring flights. That's maybe a different story and you try to do a few more. But if you are thermaling and doing some cross-country flights, you are really going for one per day.
Do you think Volbiv with this hang glider setup, is it realistic to go very deep? What I mean by deep is, in the Alps, you don't necessarily need to carry a lot of food, because especially if you're landing down in the valley bottom, you can just go to the bakery and get more stuff and have a nice night and then go back up the next day. And like you said, and if you're only really shooting for one flight rather than a morning sledder and then the big flight of the day and then an evening sledder or something, if you're only going for one, then you're not so worried about time. I imagine you can take time to have a breakfast and take the cable car up, or hike, and especially if you hike slowly, you can save a lot of energy. But given the weight, it is heavier. Like you said, it's more like carrying a tandem kit. Is the approach quite different in terms of how deep you can go?
Yeah. Well, first, a big difference is how much you rest after the hike. So if you are thinking about taking a cable car or any other way of transport up the mountain, except hiking, then you might very well do it just before the flight, because then you can probably assess the weather conditions better. You can choose the ideal spot to go. And so you go up, you're taking the transport, and then everything is rather easy. If you are doing a hike, you probably don't want to do that because it's going to be more tiring. And so you probably will prefer to either hike up in the evening, after your flight for the next day, so that you sleep on top of the mountain already. Or if you are doing just a 1 or 2 days, that is what I do more often, you might just hike up starting at the evening. So for example, one of the flights that I like to do the most here in Switzerland with the hang gliding, with the hang glider hiking, is on a specific hot air balloon festival that happens every January in the French side of the country. And there's no cable car up. There were cable cars, but they have been closed for close to 10 years now. And so the only way up is hiking. And last year, for example, I went up with the goal to fly relatively soon afterwards, but then I had to be there for close to 3 to 4 hours to really just rest, because I was quite tired after hiking up with the whole gear for 4 hours. This year, for example, I started in the evening. Was about 4 a.m., went up, got to see the sunrise. That's quite magical as well, with all the mountains full of snow, and then waiting there very relaxed until the hot air balloon starting to take off, so that I could then fly with them. I think that's the biggest difference, that you need to really account properly with the time for resting after the hike, because otherwise you are destroyed. Then in terms of how deep you go, if you are looking for thermals and trying to push it, I think the limitations are more associated with the landing areas. So depends on the valleys where you are. If you have been flying in those places and you know that you have familiar spots where you are going to land, or you studied the terrain before, then I don't see a big difference between that one and paragliding. But again, assuming that you do have the nice flat places to land, or that you have the right technique to land going up the slope. Not my case.
If you say you're looking at the weather, and I know you're very good at weather, so you're sitting in Lucerne in Switzerland, and let's say this Monday looks really good, and you can get a couple days off of work. What kit are you going to grab? If you've got, okay, I've got a 2 or 3 day window here for a really nice local triangle bivvy, and maybe you can get into the Vallis or something, and whatever, you pick it, but something that looks pretty good where you can cover some ground for 2 or 3 days. Are you going to grab your paraglider kit or your hang glider kit?
Depends on the weather conditions. If the weather are perfect for specific spots, I will always choose the hang glider kit. Because there are some spots where the probability or the likelihood of flying with a hang glider are much more reduced than with a paraglider because of the conditions to take off or the conditions to go up regarding transport, regarding cable cars. So for example, if I have north wind, I will always take the hang glider because I go up the glacier here that is at 10,000 feet, just taking the cable car, easy to do with a paraglider, but rare to do with a hang glider, but I'm lucky enough with this short pack that I can do it. And then taking off from that direction, I know that I can go either towards the east or towards the west. I know that both directions have relevant, interesting spots to land, and thus I prefer the hang glider. If I have but a more varied weather situation where I might not have the wind conditions to allow me to take off from point A, go to point B, and take off from point B easily with a hang glider, then I choose the paraglider, because the paraglider is easier to take off with more varied wind conditions, right? You see in the X-Alps also, sure. And maybe in a random slope, you see people taking off with backwind, taking off with side wind, standard wind, of course. Headwind is even easier. You don't see anyone taking off with backwind on the hang glider because the speed for takeoff it's higher, and again the wing is closer to the ground, and therefore you really need to have a little bit of help from the air already, from wind, to make sure that the wing is more stable. Otherwise, while you run, the movement of running creates some oscillation on the wings that, if the terrain is not the best, might again mean that you touch the terrain with the tip of your wing, and then it's not a then you crash on the takeoff. So if the wind is changing more, I will go for the paraglider. Paraglider is for sure more versatile. If you have to choose between paragliding and hang gliding and you only want to do one, I would say go for paragliding because it's much more versatile. You can fly in more conditions, in more places, etc. You do not have the same body position feeling as a hang glider, and if you would like to have that one, I think that these short pack gliders are a good direction, because the increase in logistics, it's visible, but it's not the end of the world. Again, like I mentioned before, it's like transporting a tandem paragliding wing kit.
Yeah, it's reasonable.
It's feasible. You can put it under your bed. If you live in a city, that's easy. You can transport it on a bus, on a train, on anywhere really. And again, you can access those places and have the possibility of flying in spots where only hang gliders will fly, either because of the wind or because of the steepness of the terrain, whatever it might be.
That was the next thing I was going to ask. So my supporter in the last couple of X-Alps, Revis, who's also been on the show, but a good friend of mine, he got into hang gliding a few years ago to learn something new and to fly prone and the things that people get into hang gliding, but also because he really likes flying big distances in Nevada. And Nevada is one of our states that it's the most mountainous state, second to Alaska. The glider pilots love flying there because of the wave. But it's also it tends to be pretty windy, so for the days that we can fly paragliders out there, they're when they're good, they're amazing. It's one of the best in the world, but they're few and far between because there's just often too much wind. And so you wanted to learn how to fly hang gliders because you can fly in more wind. Is that still the case with these short pack gliders?
Yes, for sure. If you have stronger wind, you always prefer to be on the hang glider than the paraglider. And the short pack hang gliders, again, when they are opened, they are standard hang gliders. Again, not competition class. The short pack look more like a not beginner, but maybe intermediate wing level. But that still gives you the advantage of the speed range that you'll have with the glider. So if I have, for example, 30 kilometers per hour, so that's 20 knots west, I can still go and fly a hang glider in a couple of spots easily here, and similarly for different wind directions. But
great.
probably I'm thinking about going more deeply into a valley where I'm more protected and where the valley wind local phenomenons are actually the ones governing the weather situation if I want to go with a paraglider. But with a hang glider, I have less that problem. It's I think
so more range.
Ultimately,
it just gives you more range.
Gives you more range, and the range also starts at higher speed. That's relevant as well. Again, very light winds, paraglider is easier. Stronger winds, eventually paraglider stops being an option, right? And hang gliding is still an option at those higher winds. Of course, eventually there's a limit as well. That being said, I wonder if you ask me again in 5 years if I'll still agree with that, because developments in the technology of paragliding. We have these parakites now that can fly with faster speeds, standard flights than most paragliders did before. Of course, there's also the speed wings, but that's a different type of flying. You are typically just going down, right? Unless it's really windy, and then you might be soaring as well. So it seems that the gap there it's getting shorter between paragliding and hang gliding at higher wind speed conditions. Often in the hang gliding community, there's a discussion about what's happening to the sport and to the practitioners of hang gliding, because the reality is that while in the 60s, 70s, 80s was very popular, it has been a steady decrease since then. And of course, that's associated with the introduction of paragliding, because hang gliding used to be the cheapest, most affordable, most easy to learn, and logistically best method to learn how to fly and to fly wherever you wanted, until paragliding appeared, and then it's paragliding without a doubt, right? And it will never become hang gliding again, because paragliding is, again, just a bag. Run and fly deck wing is 1 kilo or something like that. The X-Alps kits are typically 2 to 3 to 4 kilos. So you will never be able to compete in the hang gliding world with that. And eventually hang gliding went into a direction of performance. I think that there is space for this adventure type of hang gliding, and we have been talking about Volbiv, but I will expand it and call it more adventure type of flying, because you can just take the wing to places where you wouldn't otherwise take a hang glider because of the logistics of carrying it. Just in the last 12 months, I've flown in a desert island, I've flown from the glacier, I've landed on a frozen lake, I've flown with the hot air balloons, and I'm a beginner to intermediate hang glider pilot. It's not that those were incredibly difficult flights per se, it's that the logistics are incredibly difficult for a standard hang gliding kit. But for these short packs, suddenly it gets much easier. So I think there's some place there for the short pack gliders to occupy a place for someone that has been paragliding, that wants to try something new, but doesn't want to go all the way to the competition hang gliders, because again, the logistics are a bit of a not necessarily a killer, but a big obstacle at least.
For the listeners, Emi, who are paragliders like myself and have spent their lives or most of their time under a rag rather than a rigid, what what would they be looking, who are inspired by hearing your story here today? What would be a reasonable amount of time they could look at to have to dedicate to learn how to fly a short pack well enough to start doing these types of trips?
I think a short pack glider is controlled exactly the same way that a standard one is. So basically, you need to go through the standard process of getting your license, but then instead of choosing to buy the most common long hang gliders, you'll buy a short packed one. And there's, I believe at the moment, 3 companies that sell this type of wings. All of them are still active. All of them are still selling new wings. And you see a lot of them in the second-hand market as well. In hang gliding, the second-hand market, it's very relevant because, again, there's less pilots and therefore there is more wings. There are more wings for less pilots that are searching them. Therefore, it's probably cheaper. And the wings tend to be more durable as well than paraglider wings. One of the ones that I fly, for example, is from '89. And it's still, it went for a quick check recently. They made 1 or 2 replacements of some cables, and that's it. Other than that, it's in good conditions. So it's the standard process to learn how to hang glide. And to learn how to hang glide, I think the biggest difference is that you want to learn locally. I think paragliding, probably about 70 to 80% of people learn locally, and 20 to 30% of people learn on a paragliding trip. At least those are the statistics that I remember reading. I used to work for a school focused on paragliding trips. And I think for hang gliding, you want to learn locally. And the reason for that is because it's going to be less reliable that you'll be able to fly 5 days out of 7, right? So there's going to be, out of those 5 days, one is going to be bad wind, the other one is going to be too much from the side, the other one is not going to be windy enough. So you will have 2 days that are perfect for learning in your local area. And therefore, in the process of going to the classes whenever you have the availability, you can expect to get your license. Depends again of how much dedication you put into that, but top level from 6 to 12 months if you are dedicating weekends, for example, or every odd weekend to it. And then once you get your license, you can already be doing this type of flights because they are not technically more difficult than the others. It's really technically they are exactly the same. It's just the access to the takeoffs that with a standard hang glider it's quite difficult. With a short pack, suddenly it becomes much easier. You can basically go and take any cable car that paragliders take, or bus, or boats, or trains, or whatever, right? I even use an electric bicycle with a Thule, that is this little car that is connected to the bicycle where my daughter goes in, and so I put the Thule, then I put a stand-up paddle on top of it, and the glider fits perfectly in. So it's really easy to go anywhere. So the short message is that the logistics become much more easy. It's the logistics that are the change here, not really the skill necessary to fly. Those wings fly the same as the others. Will be somewhat like talking in paragliding, talking about a standard double surface wing and a single surface wing. We fly them more or less in the same places with the same conditions. One of them is probably easier to carry up the mountain.
We'll have to put up a picture on the website when we post this with your gear. I'm having trouble imagining it. Is it still a backpack and then you've got the rods over your shoulder, or the tubes over your shoulder, or what does it look like?
Probably you want to imagine one of those bags to transport your ski gear. Not necessarily just for 2 skis, but probably the family size. So for you, for your wife, and for the kids. And then you have it on your back. It's the exact same size, same dimensions. I actually also have one of those ski backpacks to put the hang glider on. It's a little bit tight, but it works, and it has advantage that it has the wheels, while my standard carrier doesn't. So depending on where I go, I might put it in one or the other. And then yes, you carry that on your backpack. On top of that, or you carry that as your backpack, and then on top of it you have your harness that you somehow attach either on top or on the side. I'll send you a few pictures from hikes so that you can imagine it. But yeah, imagine a standard hike and fly paraglider kit, and now triple or quadruple the size vertically up and down. That's what I'm carrying.
But a lot narrower, like a ski bag. I mean, like you said, a family-sized ski bag. So it's not the big fat thing that we carry with paragliders, just longer.
Correct.
That doesn't sound too bad. I mean, if you were going on a 2-week trip somewhere with your family, you got kids, you're going to go somewhere, you're going to go to South Africa to fly for 2 weeks and hang out with the family. Would you bring 2 kits? Would you bring your paraglider kit and your hang gliding kit, or is that too much?
I usually take 3, but maybe I have a very comprehensive family that allows me to do these things. I usually take a smaller paraglider if it's windy, a standard paraglider, or a little bit larger if it's light wind, and the hang glider, yes. Okay. As long as I'm not going on you said South Africa, so probably to go there I will have to fly. So I was actually answering if I can drive there, if we are going for a tour in the van. If I'm flying, then I probably either choose one or take both if I'm going alone. If I'm going with a family, realistically, I just take the paraglider because I know that I will not have so much time anyway to fly, and the time that it takes to assemble the kit and to disassemble it. So instead of being 5 minutes with a paraglider, 20 minutes if you are doing it really slowly, it becomes roughly 1 hour with a hang glider for both packing and for unpacking. And so yeah, that's time that I'm not flying if I'm doing that and my family is waiting. That will be the only limitation or the disadvantage associated again with paragliding is or with even standard hang gliding kit is how much longer it takes to unpack it. Again, compare with paragliding, that's very relevant. Compare with hang gliding, it's maybe 10-15 minutes more than the standard time anyway. So it's not a gigantic difference.
I mean,
particularly if you are flying once a day.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like this is something that could happen given the length of time for setup and tear down, hike and fly race, for example. But when you're telling these stories, I'm imagining something like the Verco fly, but in a hang glider. I mean, is it again? You're not going to be racing for the podium, but could you do it? Would it work?
So the Verco very often focuses on multi-flights per day, and usually the idea is really typically maybe 4 or 5 flights in the same day, right? So there you will have to limit it. You will have to do it in a different process. Maybe if you are doing 3 flights in the same day, it's not pleasant anymore. Then it's really just pushing it, and it's pushing your physical limits. I mean, and it's not so. You are not going to find joy, at least I will not find joy in doing that, while with a paraglider I would. I think if you were to, I was discussing it recently with one of the 2 hang gliding instructors that are active in Portugal. There's only 2 left. And I was discussing the idea of how to adapt the X-Alps for such tiny hang gliders, and we were thinking that it will have to be a different process where we will probably accept some support to go up, not everywhere, but in some places, like you have night passes right now for hiking at night, right, or running at night. You will have
that's a good idea.
Mountain pass or something like that, where you could take some sort of transport to go up, and then you'll have to have shorter distances, particularly in the beginning. And certainly the level, if a race like that was to start, the original level of the hike and fly hang gliders will be so much smaller, so much more so much low compared with the hike and fly paragliders that maybe what you do in one day in the vertical fly, maybe you will do 4 days with the hang gliding version of the competition.
Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, I'm imagining just how neat it would be to do a little hut to hut trip, not even as a race, but just personally. That'd be, they're everywhere in the Alps, and that would be a kind of a fun way. Like you said, if you had the fly on the wall landing down, and a lot of the huts are in places where there are fields relatively close. Maybe you could put together a little route that would work like that. But yeah, super inspiring. You've mentioned several times, and we all know this, that hang gliding is it's been continually suffering in terms of numbers for many years now. Do you see this as potentially bringing some interest back? Is a potential to bring people back to the sport?
I think so. That being said, I'm talking about what I like to do the most, right? I explored paragliding, hang gliding with standard kit and with these smaller packs, and eventually I found that this is the one that I like the most out of all. So yeah, I'm certainly biased in giving this answer, of course, because I'm talking about the thing that I like to do the most. That being said, I'm not the only one with this idea. Recently on the Pilot magazine of the USHPA, there was an article as well about from a hang gliding instructor based in California about the possibilities of raising the sport, or at least giving a little bit more of fresh new people starting the sport with this in mind. And that created a certain debate in the community where most people that are practicing hang gliding right now, they disagreed. Most people that were replying to the article were saying, no, we don't think that this is actually going to be something that will have people interested. That being said, hang glider went into the direction of performance in their development, and therefore the pilots that remained are naturally pilots that are also biased into the direction of performance. So here we are discussing if there is new public, not the standard hang gliding pilot that exists already, but new public that will start hang gliding. And so I still think that yes, the answer is yes, that exists. I'm not sure if that will be paragliding pilots that want to try something new, because then again, it's like you are a very good skier and now you are starting to do snowboarding, or vice versa. Might be more focused on people that are not yet flying, that they did a tandem, hang gliding tandem and the paragliding tandem, and they figure out hang gliding is the one that I like the most. And then what are my options? And usually if you give them the other options, the standard hang gliders, they say, yeah, maybe not, because the logistics are too complicated. I think if you add these into the menu, they will say, actually, I could take this one. I could learn, I could have it stored in my apartment. I can carry it inside of my car. I don't need to adapt anything, no large changes in my lifestyle, and I can just go and fly whenever I want in different places than I would usually. And I think there's a market for that, because hike and fly was also not a thing in paragliding until 20 years ago, let's say, right? In the beginning of the 2000s, okay, the X-Alps were starting, but it was not really a massive, widespread group of pilots that were flying. And now, at least in the school where I was teaching until recently, I don't have any more time because family. But in the school, we were getting maybe 1 out of 3 pilots wanted to go and do hike and fly, not competing, but they wanted to go up the mountain and fly down. So it massively changed the possibilities of the sport. And of course, you have acrobatics, and you have mini wings, and you have different types of ways to enjoy paragliding. In hang gliding, you don't really. You just have one way of enjoying hang gliding at the moment, or mostly, that is these performance wings flying in competitions or outside of competitions, and having this adventure possibilities that a short pack hang glider can bring. I believe that it will open the sport for more participants to start.
Emi, one final question. This has all been super fascinating. And yet again, every time I talk to somebody who hang glides, I'm always very inspired and I need to just take the leap. Like you said, if you ski, it's hard to take the leap to snowboard if that's what your jam is. And paragliding has just been my jam. There's, like you said, there's so many different ways to enjoy it, but flying prone just sounds awful sexy. If you could rewind the clock back to, you've heard this question many times on the show, but it sounds like 11 years ago, and you could tell that Emi what you know now, what would you tell that Emi? Would you change anything? Would you do anything differently?
Definitely, I will get one of these short pack gliders really early, and I might not have started paragliding because of that, because then I will have something that I could travel with and be able to fly in different countries easily. That being said, paragliding, having the possibility of doing both really plays in my favor for these adventures, because I very often go and fly with a paraglider first to fully understand the place before doing the commitment of hiking with a hang glider to fly there. So I guess that going in the direction of also paragliding, I would eventually have done that as well, but I would definitely have done much more hang gliding flights had I made the choice of buying, if I knew that they existed, if I made the choice of buying a short pack hang glider sooner. They are not more expensive, they are not flown differently, they are just a different way of packing the same type of wings, and the advantages that brings outweigh the disadvantages, the losing a little bit on the glide ratio and the extra time of setting up or packing the material.
Fantastic, man. Good stuff. Like you said, really inspiring, and I look forward to maybe getting over in your part of the world and sharing this experience with you. It sounds like a hoot, and you're in a very good part of the world to do it. I need to spend more time over there whenever I possibly can. So thanks, Emi. Thanks for sharing this all with us. This was not something that was on my radar. I didn't know that this even existed. So very cool.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And anytime that you come by, if you are in the Alps, you might let me know. I have an extra hang glider. We could go to the training slope. You can run down the slope with the glider. In one day, you'll manage to take your feet off the ground for sure.
I'd love to. That'd be great. Emi, appreciate it, man. Enjoy the rest of your winter.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully see you in the spring.
Thank you. See you soon, Gavin.
If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. All of them incredibly important to keep this show going. You can give us a rating on whatever platform you listen to. You can blog about it on your website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your friends. I know a lot of good conversations have happened that way, and of course, you can support the show financially. The show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, storage, music, behind-the-scenes cost, and all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. We put out a show every 2 weeks, so if you gave us $1 a show, that's $25 a year. Quite a bit less than a magazine subscription and way less than a latte a month. You'll notice we don't have 10 minutes of advertising at the top of the show, which we get asked to do all the time, believe me. I believe advertising is a pretty toxic business model, and I want you, the listener, to know that these conversations are just authentic people giving their opinions, and we aren't being swayed by brands. But that means we rely on you, our listener. If and only if you can support the show and it doesn't hurt your pocketbook, we'd really appreciate it. Go to the website to find various ways to support the show through Patreon or other platforms where we've gone through great lengths to minimize fees so your money gets directly to us. Becoming a subscriber gives you access to all kinds of bonus information, little nuggets that don't make it into the podcast, extra content, our Ask Me Anything shows, and a lot more. We don't put anything behind a paywall and never will. If you can't afford to support the show, just send me an email and I'll set you up with an account, no questions asked. Hopefully someday you'll be in a position where you can. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. We'll see you at Cloud Base.